Hi, everybody. This is Information High, formerly the Macross Delta recap show. This is what we do when we're not recapping the Macross Delta, which is over. This is EXO, along with the magical girl, Celia Rose,
Hello, everybody.
and our resident mecha expert, Chad from the Macross Mecha Manual.
Hey there, everybody.
Today, we're going to expand on something that Chad talked about previously. We were talking about a standalone Destroid series, or how do you see this thing, Chad? Why don't you go ahead and explain to us what you would want to see in a new Macross series?
I guess this topic sort of came about as a side story, if you will, from the topics that we talked about last time. The new Macross series is coming out, and we had some expectations, what we might see from it, what we maybe want to see. And I thought it would be fun to do a little bit of talk about some of the maybe wish fulfillment or wish lists that we have for, even if it's a Macross show that's probably never going to happen. This is just sort of like, I guess, an episode where we talk a little bit about, what we would love to see as like our most favorable sort of scenario for a Macross series. Yeah, I think we mentioned the Destroid focused series last episode, and I guess I just wanted to maybe
you wanted to
talk a bit about it.
You wanted to
like just champion it.
You
exactly.
wanted to pitch
That's
it to us.
That's a good word.
Or anybody that's listening.
No, I don't have a pitch, unfortunately.
Pitch it.
I haven't put that much work into this. I just wanted to talk just generally about the idea of it and why I think it's a good idea. And also we did get some fan interest about it. I know it's actually been a popular idea over the years as well in the Macross fan community.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people object to it and some people support it and some people are like just indifferent. They're like, I could take it or leave it or something like that. So I kind of wanted to, I don't know, just use this as a way to say why I think it's a good idea kind of thing and see what you guys thought about it. So a Destroid-based series. Yeah, obviously as a mecha fan, I love Macross, and the things about Macross that I like aren't necessarily always the transforming fighters, although they are the biggest draw. I also love the ship designs, and I love the non-transforming mechas like the Destroids and the enemy mechas as well. I don't think we've ever publicly talked about it, so yeah, here goes. First off, I guess, what do you guys think of the idea? Are you guys like at all interested in the idea, or like is it something that you've ever pondered or anything?
So for me, I actually think the idea of it seems pretty fresh, and that's what I'm interested in, hearing what your ideas are for a Destroid focused series. I'm not as deep into the mechanical design stuff of Macross, but sometimes, especially because we've had 35 years worth of content, sometimes you just need to shake it up a little bit to keep it interesting and to keep the fan base motivated to follow what you're trying to present. So I think it'd be really cool to change the focus. That doesn't mean remove the Valkyries. Like, you'll probably still have them anyways because they're a staple of Macross. But changing the focus, I think, to a different type of pilot, so you still have your pilot as part of the story, would be a nice way to shake things up.
As for me, I think you mentioned it last time, and it makes sense. I think we have to get to the point where Macross comes out more frequently with their regular series, like Gundam show does. And then you could present something like this. And I'm all for it. I do want to see a Destroid show. I think the Destroids are great designs, and they deserve a focus, right? I don't know if it would take time away from the regular series. I don't know. They just have to come out with more Macross shows for me to see this kind of happening. But I'd be down to see something like this. It's the gritty stuff that everybody wants, right?
Well, I don't know if I don't know if I necessarily envision a Destroid show being part of the hardcore, hard sci-fi, gritty part of the fan base.
Pass. No, I'm just kidding.
It's dark and gritty or nothing.
I need blood.
No, I'm more with Celia. Like, my envisionment of what a Destroid series would look like, it would definitely be more in line with what Celia said, in that it's a Macross show. You're just changing the focus a little bit, shaking it up, maybe changing the scope. That's one of the other things I had envisioned for something like a Destroid series, is because the Destroids were never the focus. They were never like the stars of the show. I think that something like a Destroid series would lend itself very well to a narrowing of your focus, right? Like a smaller scope.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much like big grand war space opera,
Yeah.
although the story could take place around that. You'd want to do something a little bit more more small, make it into more of a character story rather than a space opera adventure kind of tale. At least that's what I had in mind anyway. Personally, when I think about this Destroid series, I never really had any sort of tone set in stone for it. I don't necessarily envision it as dark and gritty. I don't envision it as a comedy necessarily either, but I think it's, one of the things that's great about this sort of series is that it's open. I think for me, one of the things that's sort of kept this going over the years, this idea that, this would be something worthwhile, is that whenever you're examining like any given work of fiction from which to build further stories, I always think that one of the wisest things to do, like as a writer or a creator wanting to make more stories, is to look past the original work itself and kind of, I guess, divorce yourself from doing a sequel. Right? It can lead to better creative choices more often than not, because it forces one to create and innovate more on their own. Like rather than like having it set, oh, we're going to do a sequel, it like forces you to actually create like you did the first time around. It's like, this isn't going to be a sequel. It isn't going to, use the same characters. It isn't going to like, do the same thing. So it forces you to actually create almost a new sort of format than you did before, while still keeping, those elements that made the original Macross what it is. And now, like, obviously, some folks will quickly offer all the examples of strong sequels, right? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with sequels. You might even argue that, for your own personal preference, that some of them were better than the original, and that might be true. These are the exception, I think, more than the rule. We generally get more terrible sequels. I think the Destroid idea kind of works better, because it's not necessarily like just the nature of it itself lends itself well to more creativity and a more different type of story. I think it's also worthwhile to create fiction based on momentum and what would naturally come next, not just something that's sequentially coming next. So that's kind of what's kept this idea alive for me over the years.
Do either of you guys see them trying to integrate the Macross elements in this, and maybe the Destroid takes over like the mecha action part of it, or do you see them kind of like booting the other two elements, like the love story and the music?
I don't know if you can have a Macross series without the music element. And that's one thing that I've really liked about what Macross has done as a franchise, is each iteration within the franchise has the musical element, but they use it differently. Mm-hmm. Where you had how it was used in SDF, and then in Plus, the music is actually the force that they have to fight against with Sharon Apple. Even in Zero, it wasn't as prominent because Sarah wasn't a pop star, but it was still very important to the story. So I think the music will probably stay. And maybe it's just the way that Delta kind of handled their triangle. It was very unbalanced. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if we're going to see just different ways of approaching the triangle where, it doesn't really feel much like a triangle at all. Or if it is a triangle, it's not going to be like where everyone has an equal chance and you can't really tell who's going to win, or even a point where like no one ends up with anybody. Like Frontier, except without fixing it with the movies, So I think those elements will stay. I just think that with the Destroid storyline, you'll have to take it from a different approach than in the stories where you had the Valkyries. And I think the Valkyries will still be present. They just won't be the focus.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something I want to iterate as well. I know that over the years, some people have said you can't have a Macross show without the Valkyries and stuff, and I would tend to agree. But I also, again, I've never personally envisioned a Destroid focused story as being without Valkyries at all. Mm-hmm. Right? It was always like, well, the Destroids will become the hero mecha of the series, where the Valkyries typically take front and center, right? So you'd still have your Valkyries for sure, but they wouldn't be the focus. And they'd appear throughout the series, of course. And you might even, just because they're Valkyries, you probably have a tendency to present them and focus on them a little bit more than, say, the Destroids were focused on in most of the other Macross shows, right? Even though they were background mecha. So you'd probably want to have the Valkyries a little bit more front and center. But yeah, I'd never... Personally, when I was thinking about a Destroid show, I was considering like all the mecha would be there. You'd have your spaceships, you'd even have your transforming Macross, of course, and you'd have your Valkyries, but the Destroids would definitely be the focus. They'd take center stage this time. The one thing is clear, if you have your story centered around Destroids, you are going to want to design them to be kind of like looking like hero mecha, right? They might be a little less sort of utilitarian and a little less tanky. They might look a little bit more like hero mecha in other mecha shows rather than how the Destroids have appeared in the past, but still like maintain like that sort of Destroid aesthetic. But with the Valkyries, I actually think this could be like a good opportunity to be more creative with them because they're no longer the focus of the show. You wouldn't necessarily have to design a hero variable fighter like a hero Valkyrie.
Mm-hmm.
You could actually take
Oh.
greater creative risks with your Valkyrie because your Valkyries will be put as the background and supporting mecha. You could actually do a lot of things that maybe you wouldn't ordinarily do with them when you're designing them.
Yeah, you could do something like the Thunderhammer, like just put it in the background, and
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. Or something like the variable bomber, like the enemy mecha from Macross 7, right? One of the enemy mecha looked like almost like a B2 bomber, but like it was like a purple sort of mecha. The Saber Garan, yeah, the Saber Garan, which was like the one that Proto Devlin piloted, right? And it was Gavel was piloting it, and it was like a pinkish purple sort of mecha, and it was like a wide winged sort of bomber kind of craft, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could even design something like that as your Valkyrie, rather than having like a traditional jet fighter Valkyrie, right? It would all depend on what you wanted to do, and then yeah. The other thing great about like a Destroid series as well, I was thinking like it wouldn't necessarily be time dependent. Like you wouldn't have to do a sequel or a prequel. You could do something like something that happened during the events of an existing show, right? Just in a different location. Or like it could be a side story altogether about a completely different conflict that was going on at the same time as like Space War 1 or the Proto Devlin War or like whatever, right? Or
Vajra.
the Vajra incident and the anti-Vajra war, and yeah, it could be any of those things, right? It could even be linked to some of those conflicts that were mentioned in the backstory of some of the characters from Macross Plus. Some of the character bios for some of the characters in Macross Plus mentioned other conflicts. We don't know anything about them. We
Mm-hmm.
just know them by name. They were just filler material, really, for like character profiles and whatnot. But there's no reason that you couldn't flesh some of those things out.
This would be like a good way to. I don't know if you guys ever saw like Mobile Suit Gundam Thunderbolt, where the guys just like listen to their type of music, but you don't really actually see the idols. This would be a way to have like some of the idols that we had in the past back and just have them like sing new songs. It wouldn't take center stage. It would just be like a side thing. You know what I mean? So this would be like a good way to just bring all those old idols back.
Could even be a situation where you had like somebody like Cheryl, where she was known to travel around the galaxy
Mm-hmm.
from one colony fleet to another, from one world to another, right? And she'd put on concerts and shows and whatnot. You could even like a Destroid side story could be one of those worlds that one of the acts from previous Macross visited at one point.
Mm-hmm.
The Sharon Apple sort of thing, right? Same sort of thing, right? You could have them pop up out of nowhere, and you could even include some of their old classics as part of this this Destroid show, even though most of the music, of course, would be new.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds really cool. Bring back Basara. Have him sing at the mountain some more.
Yeah, you could literally have a Firebomber performance or a Cheryl performance or a Sharon Apple performance. It would be charming, very charming.
Or Amina Forte.
That'd be really cool.
It wouldn't be so much different from some of the stuff that they did in Delta, right? Like I remember when we were excited about the first half of Delta, one of the things I liked the most, and I think you guys will agree, is they had these little homages to other original classic Macross. Like they had like the VF1 episode and whatnot and all that sort of thing, right? And it was like those sorts of things used in moderation and used in the right way can be incredibly rewarding for like, just fans of all ages, right? Macross fans, whether they're new or old. And I always thought that something like that might work quite well in the Destroid show. And then when you put the music in there and say, oh, well, we could have these acts from previous Macross, it would be great. It would be lots of fun.
Awesome.
I think it would also like demonstrate the lasting power of a lot of those musical acts
Mhm.
because like in Frontier, and Frontier is fresh because I'm watching it right now with my friends, so it's the freshest in my memory. Like we know that Cheryl's a Firebomber fan because she even uses his catchphrase,
Yeah.
listen to my song. So it'd
Yeah.
be really cool to kind of like, if there was a time maybe in between series or like just taking a different perspective on some of those events where you can have like fun Easter eggs like that or like cameos of characters that can show up,
Mhm.
even though if they're not the main focus. And I think that'd be a really fun way to kind of introduce those things back. Because that's what made Frontier and Delta fun, was when you had those little things like, oh, the super dimensional, like Ronka Lee being called the new super dimensional Cinderella, be like, she's the new Minmay, and those kinds of things. They were just like, they were really fun to watch and to enjoy. Like when Isamu shows up at the end of Wings of Farewell,
Yeah.
and everyone knows it's him just because of the one, his Yahoo as he's flying through. I think that'd be a really fun way to include some of those things, especially when you don't have the Valkyries as the focus. You can stick like characters, Valkyries in the background, and you won't know they're there unless you're paying attention for them. So like you're watching and then, hey, that's, Max's Valkyrie in the background or something like that,
Yeah.
depending on when the time frame is that it takes place. But that'd be a really cool way to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the advantages of that too is that I know that one of the common criticisms of prequels and sequels to existing franchises is whenever you have original characters show up in a prequel or a sequel or something like that, it can diminish the universe a little bit or make it feel smaller or like have some unintended like consequences for your audience's perception of that universe. But the great thing about Macross is most of those acts like Firebomber and Cheryl and the rest of them and Sharon Apple and stuff like that, they actually made a point of traveling the universe. They were going from one planet to another, from one colony to another. So it makes sense that their concerts and whatnot would show up from one side of the UN Spacey to the other. It makes sense that you would see them at like other parts and other stories going on in the galaxy at the same time. Their presence would not have the same diminishing effect on the world building of the franchise of Macross as it does for something like, say, Star Wars, when you when you throw a character in there like a C-3PO or an R2-D2, you get like an obligatory cameo for them in a movie or something like that. And it makes the universe feel like a little bit smaller, like this entire fictional world that we've created is all focused around these few dozen characters who keep showing up in every part of the galaxy kind of thing. And it's like, no, well, in this case in Macross, the fiction has a built-in way to deal with that so that you actually don't suffer from that same problem.
All right. Well, what do you say, Celia? Are you sold? Are you going to reject this? What do you think?
I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, I think so too.
Just have something different. I was just thinking just now too, it'd be really neat. So like I always wanted an answer for what happened to Alto from the time that he folded out with the Vajra until he got back to the Frontier Fleet, because we know he made it back. We know, Shooty Star is the song where Cheryl's awake from her coma, which means Alto came back. And we know that he was trying to get back because like messages or whatever that were printed, I think in like a magazine or a drama CD or something. I don't remember, but it was a very obscure piece of material that indicated he was coming back. And one of the things I wanted from Delta was to like have Alto make a cameo, like, maybe he was with a caravan on Al Shahal or something. I don't know. But I think the Destroid side series could be great to bring the focus to a different piece of technology, but also maybe be used as a way to kind of answer some of those unanswered questions that, that are still kind of hanging out there. I don't think anyone else but me really wants to know what happened to Alto from the time that he was
folded
out until he gets back. But if it has anything to do with the space bugs, I don't know if I want to hear the answer.
Alto went back in time and he's in the Mega Road and he's actually Lady M. That's what happened.
Oh, God.
Oh.
It's like the worst of the worst fan fiction all wrapped into one.
Malto.
That's a terrible idea.
Oh, Malto. Lady Malto. Princess Malto. That's
I don't know.
terrible.
Yeah, I think I like Mikaru Michijo a little bit better as
Classic.
Lady M. So.
Mikaru Michijo. That's brilliant. I'd forgotten about that. Oh man, that's awesome.
So, but yeah, I'm totally down. I really like it when Macross takes fresh approaches to things, and I think when you have a series this old, you really have to, just to keep it alive. So if they're willing to go for something different, then I'm down for it.
One of the other reasons I think it's a good choice is because it seems to allow like some different ways. Like you guys had talked earlier about how to introduce the musical elements to something like a Destroid show. And I think it would be really interesting to try and like figure out a way for that. I was just thinking just now that if you are doing like a smaller scope of a Destroid show with a tighter group of characters with a smaller sort of scale for this kind of show, one thing you could maybe concentrate on is like the more literally and figuratively the more grounded, sort of no pun intended, but the more grounded like aspects of like what a Destroid focused story would be like. Your characters would be more foot soldiers, more grunts. You'd be a lot more close to the front lines kind of thing. It would be a lot more of a personal kind of battle. And
Oh yeah.
maybe you could introduce your musical elements by having musical acts come to entertain the troops. You'd have those moments where it's like, yeah, the Destroids are going to see a concert, while they're being, rotated off the front for once, right? And when they go to this concert, then you introduce the musical elements, right, of Macross, and you have this band who gets, some you figure out some way to keep them involved for the length of the series, right? And so that would be one way to introduce the musical aspect of Macross in a way that hasn't been done before.
And not just like a traveling band, but like a fledgling band. Like this is their first gig, and they're, like,
Yeah.
oh, I just thought of that. Like these, like, like maybe like 14 and 15-year-olds that like have only played guitar for like maybe 3 months, or like, we're in a band now. Like, oh, that would be great. They're a cover
The
band.
Macross equivalent of like a cover band or an indie band.
That'd be
right?
cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, you could have all the elements. You could have the idol who isn't an idol yet, right? Who is like, maybe destined to become an idol, or maybe she's just going to be like a minor, like she's not going to be like a Cheryl or a Sharon or like a Minmay or anything like that, but maybe she's going to be like they're going to find
A
success
Milen.
in their own right,
Just
just
kidding.
on like a smaller scale, right?
No, Alex, Claire
Like
Puddle.
some of your
Claire Puddle.
favorite bands. Yeah, you like not every musical act or artist you like, or every band that you like ends up becoming like a huge mainstream hit, right?
Cool.
And it's still pretty fresh in Delta too, because like out of Walkure, you only had 3 members that could actually produce like fold waves that actually had an effect on the VAR. Like Machina and Reina could sing, but it wasn't their primary function in Walkure.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being so fresh, that would be a nice way to kind of transition into that. Like this is a fledgling music group that's still kind of trying to find their place and figure out what they want to do. And they're not the greatest, but they have the potential to be type of thing. That would be cool. I want to see this show now. Like, like maybe like an OVA or something.
Just talking about it, and like, I mean, some of the ideas I'm bringing up are stuff that I've carried around, but other the ideas that we're talking about now, this is stuff that has just come to me as we're talking about it. Right. And it's like, it's exciting, and this is why I think that something like just the nature of it, like just saying a Destroid focus show and giving some context, all of a sudden opens up people to like pitching ideas but maybe we've never considered in Macross before. And those ideas, some of them will be not so hot, some of them will be good, but it's just like it's that freshness and that excitement, like you said, you're getting excited, about the idea of this Destroid show just by talking about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's tell us about like what do you guys think? What do you guys want to hear from other people?
I think that's the thing I'd be interested in the most, is just what are people's takes on it.
Yeah.
I don't want to shoot down anybody's idea, but the grim and dark and gritty realistic sort of Destroid show. I mean, I know that there's fans out there that want that, and there's nothing wrong with that. I would kind of like to watch a show like that as well. But I'd like to hear other people's ideas as well. And maybe not ideas for the whole show, but what we've covered here as
Yeah,
well.
what you want to
Where we
add
talk
on.
about
Yeah.
like the different Macross elements, like how would you fit them into a Destroid show, like some of the things that we've suggested, right? How would you take the pillars of Macross and how would you weave them into a Destroid side story?
Yeah, we're not here to shoot down anybody's ideas. We're here to open it up, and we want to hear what you guys think.
I want a boy band.
Boy band. We're gonna have to come back and do a boy band pitch from Celia. But
That would
You
be
could have
awesome,
you could
actually.
have a boy band in the
That's
Destroid
a
show.
whole-
What if they're the
sure.
fledgling group?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And they're like, of course, coming like trying to entertain an audience which might not necessarily be open. It might be a more hostile kind of audience. And that would make a good make a good underdog story.
Yeah, a boy band will definitely make a hostile audience within the show and outside.
A bunch of grunts being entertained by a boy band. It'd be great.
It's like when, in the Captain America movies, when he first starts his USO performances
Oh
and
my
everyone's like incredibly unimpressed.
Yeah. That's it's perfect. Yeah, everybody thinks he's a joke. Yeah, it's awesome.
Cool. All right, let's close it out. Celia Rose, where can we find you when you're not on the information high? That sounded weird, like you were high or something. When you're not on the show, information high.
You should have left out the.
I know.
And just say, where are you when you're not on information high?
Yeah, where are you, Celia?
All right, I'm actually in a lot of places these days.
I know.
You can find me. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Celia Rose Cosplay, on Twitter at Planets Twinkle. I am also a regular on the Reanimated podcast as part of the Repacked podcast family. And I just recently appeared in a video for the Nendonow channel talking about the Macross Delta Nendoroid codes that are coming out in April. And I'm also doing a meetup for Macross at SoccerCon in Seattle in April as well. Probably April 14th or 15th. I haven't decided which day yet.
Yeah.
So I am everywhere these days.
I'll be there also. We lost one. Chad, where can we find you when you're not in Seattle with us?
Well, I have an email address.
That's nice.
I'm afraid anything's gonna be like a letdown after that spiel.
I know.
Oh my God, I can't compete.
Nobody can. Celia did a show in the middle of this show.
That's it. She just we should have had her go at the end. Damn it.
You can move mine to the end.
Well, you can find me, of course, by visiting my site, the Macross Mecha Manual, and of course you can email me at marchingcw@hotmail.com, and you can visit my Facebook page at facebook.com/Macross Mecha Manual. And I haven't been posting all that much on my communities on Reddit and everything else lately, or any of the anime message boards that I usually go to. But maybe I'll get back to it one of these days. So we'll just we'll leave it at those three for now.
And this is EXO. You could actually find me on our new group. It's the Macross Fan Central group on Facebook. It's facebook.com/group/Macross Fan Central. I think that's groups with an S. And I'm on there, or you could find me on the Macross Delta page. Yeah, that's it. Let us know what you think about the Destroid show, starring Chad.
Yeah.
The voice talents of Chad. Well, I'll get my laugh in there, if nothing else.